Welcome to English. This is Mr. Fielding coming to you when you ain't in the building. Word to my homies.
To Kill A Mockingbird, Chapter 10. In this chapter, we're going to look at the overview, and then we're going to talk about the major symbol, one of the major symbols of the entire book, which is the mad dog. So, Chapter 10 starts off with Atticus is too old to do anything. Apparently, he is nearly 50. He will pass the football with Jim and Scout, but he'll play keep away, but he will not play tackle. He does not do what the other fathers do. He doesn't hunt. He doesn't play poker. He doesn't fish. He doesn't drink. He doesn't hold a job that causes any kind of interest that the students would like to talk about until he takes on the Tom Robinson case. It's Uncle Jack that teaches the kids how to shoot. As Uncle Jack says, Uncle Jack instructed us in the rudiments thereof. Shooting. He said Atticus wasn't interested in guns. Atticus said to Jim one day, "I'd rather you shoot at tin cans in the backyard, but I know you'll go after birds. Shoot all the blue jays you want. If you can't hit them, but remember, it's a sin to kill a mockingbird." And then Miss Maudie adds to this. "Your father's right," she said. "Mockingbirds don't do one thing but make music for us to enjoy. They don't eat up people's gardens, don't nest in corn cribs. They don't do one thing but sing their hearts out for us. That's why it's a sin to kill a mockingbird." And this conversation then gets into a conversation about the fact that Atticus can't do anything. And Miss Maudie doesn't agree with that. She does say that you and Jim have the benefit of your father's age. If your father was 30, you'd find life quite different. "I sure would. Atticus can't do anything." "You'd be surprised," said Miss Maudie. "There's life in him yet." Yeah, he's only 50. What can he do? Well, he can make someone's will so airtight, can't anybody meddle with it. Shoot. Well, did you know he's the best checker player in town? Why, down at the landing when we were growing up, Atticus Finch could beat everybody on both sides of the river. Good Lord, Miss Maudie, Jim and me beat him all the time. It's about time you found out that it's because he lets you. Did you know he can play a Jew's harp? So that was and even Scott says that this modest accomplishment served to make me even more ashamed of him. No, ashamed of him. Both Jim and Scout are ashamed of Atticus because he can't do anything. Note that one of the big things in town is the football game. And Atticus can't play in the Methodist Baptist football teams. The Methodists are trying to pay off their mortgages. It's a benefit game. And it's Sequel Jacobs' father, ironically, who scores all the touchdowns in this game. Sequel Jacobs is the boy in the previous chapter that called Atticus Finch a nigger lover. This detail is important because the verdict on Atticus as a nigger, quote unquote, nigger lover probably comes from the father. The father is one of the leaders of the opposition against Atticus Finch. He is the hero of the football game, not Atticus. Then one Saturday, Jim sees Tim Johnson, a dog, sort of loping down the street, looking sick. It's February. Tim Johnson turns out to have rabies. He is a mad dog. Note a little background on rabies. Rabies can enter the nerve cells and use them as a conduit to infect brain cells. So it destroys or changes the way people, the dog thinks. It destroys brain tissue. And this causes disorientation, confusion, and delusion. Those are all important. Calpurnia has to call Miss Eula May to warn the town. "I know it's February, Miss Eula May, but I know a mad dog when I see one. Please, ma'am, hurry." And the Radleys don't have a phone, so Calpurnia has to run across the yard, the street, and knock on the front door. Even though they respond. We watch Calpurnia running toward the Radley place, holding her skirt and apron above her knees. She went up the front steps and banged on the door. She got no answer, and so she shouted, "Mr. Nathan, Mr. Arthur, Mad Dog's coming! Mad Dog's coming!" And then Hecate and Atticus show up to get rid of the Mad Dog. And here's some before we get to them, there's some really interesting descriptions of the Mad Dog. He walked erratically, as if his right legs were shorter than his left. He reminded me of a car stuck in a sandbar. He's gone lopsided, said Jim. And it turns out to be old Tim Johnson. Then Atticus and Hecate. Hecate is the sheriff of Macomb. Another introduction to a character that's going to be a minor character, but he's going to be very important in the second part of this book, particularly when we get to the aftermath. We get to the court case and the aftermath of the court case. He's even going to be a witness in the court case. Hecate tells Atticus to actually shoot Tim Johnson. "Take him, Mr. Finch." Mr. Tate handed the rifle to Atticus. "Don't waste time, Heck," said Atticus. "Go on. Mr. Finch, this is a one-shot job." But Atticus won't take it. "For God's sake, Mr. Finch, look where he is. Miss, and you'll go straight into Radley's house. I can't shoot that well, and you know it." "I haven't shot a gun in years," Atticus says. Mr. Tate almost threw the rifle at Atticus. "I'd feel mighty comfortable if you did it now." And so Atticus takes the gun. The rifle cracked. Tim Johnson leaped, flopped over, and crumbled on the sidewalk in brown and white heap. So, and then Miss Molly calls him, one shot. Then on page 112, you get a lesson. Miss Molly says, "You didn't know that your father was the best shot in Macomb County, did you?" And of course, Jim is kind of amazed, and so is Scout. They used to call him One Shot Finch. I wonder why he never goes hunting, Scout says. "If your father's anything, he's civilized in his heart. Marksmanship's a gift of God, a talent. Oh, you have to practice to make it perfect, but shooting's different from playing the piano or the like. I think maybe he put his gun down when he realized that God had given him an unfair advantage over most living things." "Looks like he'd be proud of it," Scout says. "People in their right minds never take pride in their talents," said Miss Maudie. So here's lesson 10. Talent is, this idea of pride. Talent is something that's given from, that people are born with. You can develop it and perfect it, but it's something that gives you an advantage perhaps over someone else. And so people in the right mind don't brag about what they're good at because they're just good at it. And they know it. There's if you think about the people who are the best at something, they never brag at it. They don't have to brag. Atticus doesn't have to brag about the fact he's a good shot. There's the bragging would not bring him anything. He also realizes it's given him unfair advantage over living things, particularly if he's going to hunt them. So he gave up shooting. He has no interest in guns. This leaves Jim to respond, that Atticus, tell Scott not to tell anyone at school about Atticus shooting the dog or Atticus being the best shot in Macomb. And leaves him with, Atticus is a gentleman just like me. So Scott wants to be a gentleman like Atticus. There's this new refound pride in who their father is. All right, so this leads us into the Mad Dog as a symbol of racism, and how people, and think about this, how people who are racist, and it's not really a symbol of racism, but how a symbol of how people who are racist react in connection to things that relate to skin color. They act like out of their minds, disoriented, confused, or delusional. just like if you had rabies. Um, the thing to think about here is the mob scene and the court scene. Now, how do I know that this mad dog is a symbol? Well, you need to look at where the chapter is located. It's located right after the intro to this idea that Atticus has taken this job to defend Tom Robinson, and he's been called a nigger lover. And right before the major part of the courtroom scene starts, so it's really into those things to sort of foreshadow how people are going to react. We also have Cecil Jacobs' dad appearing as the hero of the football game, knowing that Cecil Jacobs is, the father is the vocal of Atticus being a nigger lover and the leader, or a leader of the opposition to Atticus. You also have the dog's name. Tim Johnson sounds a lot like Tom Robinson, um, and it's there for a reason. Um, Tom, of course, is the man, the African American on trial. Further, Tim Johnson is a bird dog. He's called a bird dog in the chapter. A bird dog is a dog that retrieves birds, particularly birds that have been shot. Note the number of birds in this chapter that are mentioned. You have mockingbirds, it's a sin to kill a mockingbird, but you also have finches, and the mad dog technically goes after the finches, and is shot by Atticus. It's almost like the idea that Atticus is trying to kill the mad dog, which is racism in the chapter, before racism sort of takes over the people of the town, particularly those who are innocent, the finches. Remember, in the previous chapter, Atticus does not want Scout or Jim to catch Makeham's usual disease, which is racism. Further, you also have Tom Robinson as a type of bird. Note, Robinson is really just would mean a person who is a son of Robin. Robin, of course, is also a bird. So you have all these things here. You also have it's February, and note that there's this talk about mad dogs usually happen in August, not in February. But racism happens year round. There's a reason why Harper Lee made it February and not August. Note the court case is going to be taking place during the summer, and so where it's going to be a little bit hotter, and so people will be more out of their minds, right? And then you also in this chapter you have the introduction to Hecate. Hecate is described here on page 107. Mr. Hecate was sheriff of Macomb County. He was as tall as Atticus, but thinner. He was long-nosed, wore boots and shiny metal eye holes, boot pants, and a lumber jacket. His belt had a roll of bullets sticking out of it. He carried a heavy rifle, and apparently he's not a good shot. But Hecate here is, introduced. Think about his name. It might have some meaning to it. He will be important later on in the second part of this book. You also have the themes. You have lesson 10, this idea of pride, the fact that those things that are given talents we shouldn't take pride in, because they've given us an advantage over others, by birth, by just having those talents. And then you have the themes here, and there's three main themes. One is the theme of duty. Think of Calpurnia. Calpurnia has to warn all the neighbors, the neighborhood, that there's this mad dog to protect him. Even so much to put herself at danger to run across and knock on the Radleys' house. Then you have Atticus, who does not like to shoot, but has to in this case in order to protect the neighborhood. So this idea of duty, Calpurnia, Atticus. Then you have this appearance versus reality. Well, before we get to appearance versus reality, you have the theme of prejudice, really the prejudice against old people. Atticus is 50. He can't do anything, which is, I think, a common perception of most kids whose fathers are maybe a little bit older. He can't do anything, but of course he can. And intertwined with this theme of prejudice, you have appearance versus reality. Atticus is more than what he appears to be. Most people are. So this is the meaning of duty, theme, prejudice. You have the one a theme of prejudice against old people, but you also have also in that racism, and then you have appearance versus reality. All right, that is it for chapter 10. I hope that helped. I will see you again tomorrow.